Hello, LinkedIn. Hello, fellow HR professionals. I'm doing weekly live interviews, and usually I think you'd agree I'm, cool, calm, and collected. Today I'm feeling a little bit, I don't know, what's the right word? Intimidated, perhaps, but very, very excited. I am interviewing today Professor Dave Ulrich. This is where my Russian accent comes out and I have trouble pronouncing things. Professor Ulrich, and probably surely you know, since you are watching right now, is essentially an HR celebrity. And I don't know, he's an academic and, highly distinguished academic. He might, take issue with that type of a descriptor, but it's true. As I was telling him before we went live, when I was sharing with my HR network that I was interviewing him, the reaction I was getting was akin to the reaction, that we have or our younger selves had celebrity sightings. And I thought that was so, so cool. So Dr. Ulrich is a distinguished academic. He's a speaker. He has a very strong, also personal brand of his own. He's authored over 30 books. He has been called the number one management educator and guru, and is frequently called the father of modern HR. And again, I know many of you know that because many of you have told me that when you were studying HR in university, you studied his work and a lot of his models and a lot of the things that he created. So enough of me talking. Let me introduce our guest, who I'm so grateful to have on the show today. Good afternoon, Professor.
First of all, please call me Dave, and if I may, I'd love to call you Marina.
Absolutely, thank you.
How do I pronounce your last name? I won't be able to, but
would you give it a try?
Bishanova?
Listen, you were very close. You didn't say Z. It's Bejanova.
Bejanova. Okay. Dave is so much easier for me. And welcome to my office. This is a unique time in our global pandemic lives when we get to peek into people's offices and see how they live. So this is my office, and I welcome you into my office. Do not be intimidated. I was combing my hair when we got on the call, and
we're both doing the same thing. We're both
so please don't be intimidated and call me Dave. It's delightful to have the privilege of visiting with you.
Great, thank you so much. And I will have to start with what I just found out. Right, we'll continue, Justin, with what I just found out when we were chatting before going live. You lived in Montreal for a few years.
Oui, c'est un bon plaisir d'être ici avec toi. Nous avons habité à Montréal, à Ville-Montréal, pour 3 ans, 2002 à 2005. And I've just proven to you I don't speak very good French.
No, you just spoke French. I really did not expect that today. Could you just tell us why you were in Montreal?
I'm a professor and have been a professor for since 1982. My wife is a psychologist, and we got invited by the leaders of our church to go to Montreal and run a mission for our church in Montreal. By the way, we're working at home, and in my office, the phone may ring, and you may have a pet, and children may run in the background. That's the new world we live in, and I think we're fine with that. But so from 2002 to 2005, I ran a mission for our church. We lived in Montreal. We served up in Quebec and Rimouski and Val d'Or, as far north as people want to go, and then over to Ontario. So we just loved Montreal. I have such passion for the people, the Quebecois, the Ontario, those from Ontario, and we got very, very close with many people. And I was basically a minister or the president of a church. I remember going to Sherbrooke one day, where we had a branch of our organisation, and j'ai donné un discours à Sherbrooke. J'étais le président, c'était mon titre. Et une vieille dame est venue et elle m'a dit, Président, tu as un accent mignon. Which, and for those who don't speak French, and for those who do, I have to translate. I gave a talk in Sherbrooke as part of my ministry service, and an older woman came up and she said, President, you speak like a young, small child. And I never could master the language, but I grew to love Montreal. It is one of the most beautiful cities with just wonderful, wonderful people and restaurants and places. And we just really enjoyed living there. It was a privilege for us, for
That
both
is
of us.
incredible. I really did not expect to hear that at all today, and I've been researching you, but did not find that part. During those years, did you put your academic
I
career,
did.
your research
I
on hold?
did. We were asked to serve full time for 3 years. And so, yeah, for those who have faith, whatever faith it is, and it doesn't matter which faith it is, but when the head of that faith asks you to contribute, I'm going to get emotional at the beginning of an interview. I think our faith becomes a part of our identity. And we lived it. I don't force it. I just as well not force that on anybody. I think people find their own way to find meaning and purpose in lives. But that was meaningful for us. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My wife and I served with each other, which was a wonderful experience because we both had busy lives. And we just did the things churches can do. And I know in Quebec, some of the history about religion is not always positive. When I say sacrament or tabernacle, those are not good words, and I apologize. I understand what they are. But we tried to bring a feeling of peace and a feeling of hope to those that we served. And it was just a marvelous, marvelous experience.
Well, that's beautiful. And you know what's interesting is that you just answered my first question, which you don't know what my questions are, but somehow I think I just got an answer, but maybe I didn't. As I've been becoming acquainted with your work, I noticed that, there's obviously the strong, academic research-based part, you've developed models and very tangible things for HR, but there's the big piece that makes your work, I believe, so unique, which is your focus on everything that perhaps falls under the umbrella of soft skills. You talk a lot about empathy, you talk about purpose, you talk about those things that are not talked about much, I find, especially in academia. My question was why? Where does that come from? Does that come from childhood? Where does that come from? I'm wondering if in part you answered that when you talked to me about faith.
There are two F words, and they're good F words that I think have shaped me: family and faith. And I think I was so privileged to grow up with. Ooh, do I have it? I'll show you something. With an incredible mother. My wife made this book for our family. That's my mother, and it's a book of memories. And she's still alive. She's now 92, and my mother and my father were both iconic people in my life. And I will ask you about yours. A picture. That's my mother as the prom queen in high school. Oh,
I was going to tell you when you showed me the cover that she's a beautiful woman.
She is, and she still is. That's my father. My father is proud that he had the lowest grades at the university where he went. He was not an academic. He loved trees. He loved forestry, and so my father was a forest ranger. But outside of their professional lives, they taught me the values of service and of service through faith and service through family. I have great memories of my mother when I was growing up, buying food for those in need. My father, when he retired at age 55, I have a picture of him over here. I have a picture of him in his truck somewhere. When my father retired at 55 from a government career, he did what he called his bread run every day. So he went to stores where he lived in Kansas City in the United States, and he picked up their day-old fruit and their day-old bread, which was still good, but it was a little old. And he put it in the back of his truck, and he drove around and gave it to the needy, the women's shelters, the homeless shelters. And 5 days a week, 3 hours every morning, Dad did his bread run. And whenever I'd visit, he'd ask me to go with him, and we did it. And even as he got older and had a harder time walking, he's now passed away, we did his bread run. And I think those lessons early on get scripted. Sometimes I was upset. We'd be driving home on the freeway. Somebody was stopped on the side of the road. Dad would always stop. Can I help you? I have a flat tire. Oh, where are you? Oh, I'm from New York. We're traveling through. We have a flat tire. Well, come spend the night at our house. Oh, Dad, we don't need to do that. But I think that's ingrained. Where did you get that? For me, it was my mother, my father, my faith. those things get ingrained, and they're really a part of who I hope I am today. What about you? What drove some of you? You came from Russia. Uh,
Yeah, it came from Ukraine. So I was
Ukraine.
born in the Soviet Union and then grew up in post-Soviet Ukraine. You know, my biggest mission that I have discovered in life, my why, is to give people a platform and a voice and scale the reach of their voice. I'm passionate about talking, about working with people who are at crossroads or struggle and helping them, you know, again, figure out their voice, give them the platform and give them the reach. And the reason this is quite simple. It also comes, you know, same as you, from upbringing. I grew up in the culture of censorship, where there was no platform and no voice. But it took me very many years to understand why I was so passionate about it, why I'm passionate about, you know, connecting people, having people, again, expand their reach. And it comes from childhood again. Did you know what you wanted to be when you were growing up?
Not at all. Well, I wanted to be an attorney, and I have no clue why. Again, my family was not academic. I went to the university, started studying, planning to go to law school. A colleague and a friend, he's still a friend, this was decades ago, saw us eating, my wife and I was married pretty young at 20, 21. And I said, what's going on? And Paul said, what are you going to do? I said, I want to take a course. And he said, you should take this course called OB, Organizational Behavior 321, from a man named Bonner Ritchie. And I didn't know any better. And I said, fine, I'd be delighted to take that course. I signed up for it. And to be blunt, that course and that experience really gave me a different path. Bonner Ritchie, who's still a mentor today and alive, came to the class and he said, you live in organizations where you work, where you worship, where you play, where you do things in your life. I want you to think about and study those organizations. He captured my imagination. I was an English major. This is a story probably too long. And I had to write papers on Paradise Lost or Shakespeare. Every paper I wrote was about the organizational implications of Beelzebub in chapter 2 of Paradise Lost, how he exercised power, how King Lear engaged other people. Beowulf. I remember my first paper and he said, there's nothing required. You show me what you're learning. So I wrote a paper called Beowulf, the Ideal Organization Man, which was based on some old research on sociology. I cheated. I turned it into English and I turned it into Bonner's class. My English teacher said, this is weird. Bonner said, this is great. Do another one. In his class, in 15 weeks, I wrote 15 10-page papers. And he called me and he said, nobody's ever written 10, 15-page papers on their life and their experience. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to law school. He said, don't waste your time. Study OB. So I called my mom and my dad and I said, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm going to study OB. And they were so excited. They thought it was obstetrician, a doctor. Our son will be a doctor. And I said, no, it's not a doctor. It's organizational behavior. And my mom and dad said, what's that? And I said, I have no clue, but I love it. And I learned then, and I'll end this diatribe, and nobody cares that much about me. My wife is a very, very good psychologist, and she says I have OCD. OCD is generally obsessive compulsive disorder. From the time I took that course from Bonner to today, I have OCD, which is organization compulsive disorder. I love to study organizations. I'm a horrible dinner date or family date. We go to dinner and I look at the restaurant and I say, you know, you could improve your productivity 10% if you did this, this, and this. And I call the manager over and I said, I know we're having a great dinner, but let me tell you how to improve your productivity. In the airlines, I write recommendations without being asked. My wife says, Dave, stop that. You got to get rid of OCD. It's not helping you.
That was my question. What's your wife's reaction while
she just says, well, people don't want to go to dinner with us. But by the way, I've learned to temper that. But I just really enjoy thinking and observing how organizations work. In this pandemic, it's so interesting. How do organizations work? How do they get things done? How do they go about doing their job? How do they manage things? that's my interest. And I've had that for now 40 years, and increasingly with research and ideas and things that I think make a difference. So I write books about that. I think about it. I'll finish that. That's way too long of a story. Our children are all married, and we have three children, all of whom have PhDs. My wife has a PhD. Neither of us come from an academic background. And their spouses all say, if you're going to have Sunday dinner at the Ulrich house, you've got to do your homework, because they get in and they start to reorganize the company and reorganize politics. And frankly, I'm kind of boring that way, but that's my passion.
It's not boring at all. First of all, I relate to you. I come from a family of academics, my dad, my sister, and I finished my academic path at a bachelor's degree. It's always bothered me. I just didn't realize. So I re-enrolled. I'm starting a master's program in September.
Where?
At Concordia, Masters of Science.
Yes. That is so exciting. That's a great university. When we lived in Montreal, we visited Concordia, we visited McGill. And McGill, you have Carl Moore, who's a great professor. I know you've interviewed Carl, and Henry Mintzberg. I am so excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But, allow me to disagree with what you said before. When you were sharing your story, you said, oh, like that's not important. Nobody cares. I disagree. And, as I'm looking at the comments right now, I see somebody, Erica says, hope and peace is what we need most these days. And I think that, we can familiarize ourselves with your incredible work and read your books and learn your teachings. But it is this aura of optimism that you have and this energy that you translate that I think that is what is most needed right now in the HR community, and of course beyond as well. If you agree with me, please put in the comments that you agree, and we will tell Dave that we want more of his actual story. But so that was also one of my questions. You first of all are very active on LinkedIn, which is cool to see. There are more academics that have LinkedIn profiles that are not yet very active. So I hope that changes. The tone of your posts, even when you're writing, there was this one post you wrote about being tired of the crisis. And even that post, it just feels nonetheless positive and optimistic. Is that just natural? Do you reread your content and try to make it more positive? Is it intentional as well, or just natural for you?
I think it's more natural. I've been asked before, what was the best year of your life? And if I were to ask you, Marina, what was the best year of your life? People often look back, the year I found my partner, the year I served or did something, the year I graduated from college. And I always tell them, I think they're wrong. I think the best year of your life is next year. Mm-hmm. The best year of your life is almost always the year to come. The best is yet ahead. I believe that. I mean, we've been blessed in our lives beyond any measure. The best is always yet ahead. And that for me is what I'm trying to instill. I love your why. When you said, my why is to have a voice. What? And to give other people their voice. When this crisis hit 3 months ago, 2 months ago, wherever you were in the world, I bet you could go back in March or February when this crisis really became real for you. It became real for me. My first reaction was, oh, this isn't going to last. And then I thought, I want to have a voice. I want to tell the HR community, and through the HR community, business leaders, where I spend a lot of time, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. That's not my quote. That's a quote by dozens and dozens of thoughtful people. This crisis is an opportunity to create an inflection point, to learn, to grow, to develop, to get better. And I hope I can be what you are, which is a voice, to give people that sense of hope. So I've gone out of my way to be unnatural. I'm a very, very strong introvert. I enjoy my privacy. I enjoy my private time. But I think if we in HR are going to be helpful, as the comment said, we need to get out of our comfort zone and not let this crisis go to waste, to be a voice for hope, for personal peace, for progress. And I hope in a small way we can do that. I am finding LinkedIn a delightful platform. When you do a book, it takes about a year to get the book in my mind, about 6 months to write it, and about 6 more months to get it published. So by the time a book is published, it's 2 years out of date. I am now posting on LinkedIn every Tuesday a new piece. One Tuesday, a longer article, 1,200 words, and the other Tuesday, 150 words. Generally, I write those Saturday, Sunday, post it Tuesday. They are not elegant. They are not wordsmith, but they're current. And I love the chance on LinkedIn to then have debate. There are some folks who say, we really don't like your word caregiver. That was a big debate. Well, I am proud to be a caregiver to my 92-year-old mom. I am not ashamed of that. I'm proud of that. But that word bothered somebody, and it was good to learn that. And I find LinkedIn just a delightful platform for current ideas, distributed ideas. I get comments from Bangladesh, from India. And what's really cool for me, I don't know who it is that's commenting. This could be the senior HR person from Infosys who's happened to comment a couple of times. Or it could be a new intern who's just starting his or her HR career. And to some extent, LinkedIn democratizes. It makes the world equal. And I kind of like that as a chance to have a voice for the profession.
I think it's incredible, though, to be a person who combines two aspects. You are a thought leader and you're able to teach tangibly and actionably, but you also do inspire and give hope and, give that energy to people. There are a lot of people who are one or the other, but to bring two together is remarkable. And you are doing that.
I'm trying. I'm not sure I do it well. Sometimes, by the way, my academic friends claim I'm too practical, and my practical friends claim I'm too academic. And in that, I think I'm in the right mix because, and that's the voice I want to have, is a voice that turns ideas into impact and ideas that will make a difference in people's lives. So that's the space I'm playing in. Again, some of my academic friends don't respect it because I'm not as theoretical, rigorous, and empirical. And some of my professional friends claim I'm too ivory tower. So I love both of those worlds, and I'm comfortable with where I am. And again, I want to wish you well at Concordia. What a delight to go back and study. Good luck.
Thank you. I think it's going to be in the online format for the first term, so we'll see. I'm looking forward to connecting with professors and fellow students and actually being there, but sign of the times.
If I could give one thought, and it's a thought that may be useful to others. I think in this isolating world, we're socially distant. I'm in my office. I assume you're in your apartment or your home. I was coaching one of my business leader colleagues, and I looked and I said, "What's behind you?" And she said, "Well, I'm in the laundry room because it's the only room in my house that's private. So I have a washer dryer, I have a hanging bar." One of the things that you get is relationships. But one of the things I've learned in my life is that ideas are sometimes my best friends. And so as you go back to the academic world at Concordia or wherever you are, or HR, anywhere, don't be afraid to let ideas be your friends. And like a friend, spend time with them, think about them, invest in them, debate with them. Sometimes my ideas wake me up at night. Sometimes my ideas yell at me. Sometimes my ideas curse me. They're cleaner than dogs. But so as you go back to Concordia, find a way to fall in love, if you could, not just with the people, which you will, but with the ideas, and let those ideas become a part of who you are. And I think in HR, as our ideas get shaped, we are then able to have even more impact.
I love that. And I chose a research program instead of, let's say, an MBA, because I definitely, that's what I want. I want research. I want to go deep, a lot of the practical experience I have from the business world.
Nice.
The HR community has all of a sudden elevated its status. We can say for many years, we've been saying HR belongs at the strategy table. Why is HR not seen for the value? All of a sudden, the value has been seen. We've accelerated. It's great. But arguably also it's the HR professionals, because we're talking right now being that, voice and the positivity and, expanding on that. Arguably HR is receiving the brunt of emotional labor within organizations. A lot of
Yeah.
HR professionals are exhausted, and also, being the messengers of very difficult decisions, right? And that scale all of a sudden, it's very hard. Um, you have said in some of your writings that skills such as optimism and humor and confidence and all those skills can be learned. How can HR professionals learn them and also apply them right now when they're really, emotionally just on complete depletion? How can they exert that positivity when there's not enough bandwidth, left?
And one of the things I'm learning in this pandemic, two quick things, and then I'll try to respond specifically, is that we're each handling this very differently. Again, I've been married for quite a number of years, over 40 years. There's this stress and pressure that comes on us. And one of my friends taught me recently that under pressure, a rock can become a diamond or it can become dust. And I think in this pandemic, we respond very differently. My wife and I were just talking before we got on the call. I respond with intensity. When there's a challenge, I run into it, I face it. When I was younger, I used to do bike rides with teenage kids for 400 miles, and I did one or two every summer for 4 or 5 years. When there was a hill, I would attack the hill, go after it, be intense. My wife, who's a psychologist, tends to be reflective. She tends to be thoughtful. She tends to turn inside. I think we each respond to this crisis differently. What's interesting is that I think a lot of us are facing pandemic malaise. I don't know how to say it in English or French, but this pandemic is putting undue stress on us. It's not normal to be socially isolated, to be quarantined, to not go to dinner, to not go to movies, to not go to social gatherings. That contextual stress is forcing us out of our comfort zones. And so one of the things I hope HR does is recognize the individual connection through the crisis and then help people through that malaise. We just posted this week, and again, the date on this is not as relevant. It's a LinkedIn article, and it comes from my wife's research when she did her PhD, which was really interesting. She studied teenage depression. So imagine for a minute, think of somebody 13 to 19 who's a teenager. And here's what she looked at. The demands go up. There are incredible demands on teenagers. Social demands, emotional demands, individuation demands, hormonal demands. Does the high demand cause the teenager to be depressed? Does high demand cause depression? And the answer was no. Here's what she found. The demands go up, but on the other hand, you have resources. When you have demands balanced by resources, you stay in what she called equilibrium. I find that research fascinating. Those demands are going up with this coronavirus: social isolation, independence, competitiveness, business change. Our job in HR is to help people find resources to cope with those demands. And we laid out physical resources: sleep, nutrition, exercise, physical space; emotional resources, getting emotional resilience, finding a way to cope with the fears and turning fears into hopes and seeing opportunity; social resources, having fun, connecting with people, enjoying and finding social connection in remarkable ways; intellectual resources, becoming curious, becoming an observer of the world; and sometimes I'll call it spiritual resources, not about a religion, but about finding meaning and purpose. Our job, I think, in HR is the world is demanding, and we can't deny it. We can't reduce those demands. We can't make the virus go away, but we can find a way to increase resources for ourselves, for leaders we coach and work with, and for the employees in our company to have resources to counterbalance some of those demands. That's the agenda that I see and that I think we in HR are beginning to move towards on the emotional side.
But how does one learn?
I think you need well, let me ask you. So
or especially, this is completely, a selfish question. How does one learn humor? That's where I struggle. But also, how does one learn optimism? Because a lot of people right now are
Yeah.
being so
Great
heavy and
question.
negative?
Great question. Well, what we know from research is 50% of who we are is genetic. DNA, nature, we're born with it. I remember when our son was 15, he stood here, I stood here, and his grandfather stood here. I looked at Mike and I said, Mike, look at me, look at your grandfather. This is your future. Ah, he screamed and yelled. Um, we do have those genetic predispositions. And as I get older, I end up almost looking in the mirror and saying, Dad, go away. I don't want you around anymore. The other 50%, though, is learned. How do we learn it? Go observe somebody. Watch what somebody does. Teaching is not a natural act. When I started teaching at the University of Michigan, before almost anybody on this call was born in 1982, I was really lucky. I was 28. I got invited to teach in, quote, the executive program when I was 30. It's our senior most program, the advanced program, where people come for 4 weeks. And the other 4 faculty were some of the greatest faculty in the world. C.K. Prahalad, who was ranked number 1 in Thinkers 50, Ray Riley, Tom Kinnear, Dennis Severance. And I thought, I want to learn how to teach. I sat in the back of their classes and I took notes. And what I do is I'm taking notes on your talk here. On one side, I'd write down what they said. And on the other side, I'd make notes. How did they teach? Where did they stand? What questions did they ask? How did they use humor? I hope that we in HR are very, very good anthropologists. We observe the world around us and we see things and we say, well, how did Marina get her voice out in that call? How did she ask questions? How was she so thoughtful when she put her hand here? How did she communicate that she cared? And here's the key, and I made a mistake. I tried to copy them. I'm going to do what CK did.
Right.
CK pulled me aside. He said, Dave, stop that. Look at me and adapt it. Don't adopt it. Find your style. And so I encourage HR people, look at your heritage, your predisposition. I'll give it a very concrete example. Many of us have done what's called the Myers-Briggs test, where we get a personality score. I am 100% introvert. I am a strong introvert. But here's what I've learned. Introverts cannot have the impact when they teach as extroverts. So I watch great teachers like Marshall Goldsmith, like Linda Grattan. How do they engage people and others? And then I try to make that mine. Those are very simple hints. They're not rocket science, but I hope HR people also just have a spirit of have fun. I'll give one example. When the virus hit in our community where we live in the United States, we were socially quarantined. We were isolated. You had to be 6 feet apart. It just shut down our neighborhood. That's kind of scary. And I don't know if this happened in Montreal, where many of your listeners are, but the big issue was toilet paper. Everybody was sold out of toilet paper, which was really funny. There's 2 of us in our house. We happen to have a lot of toilet paper. So we went out just to have a spirit of fun. We bought paper bags that your children would take their lunch to school with. In the paper bag, we put a roll of toilet paper. We put a candy bar and a bottle of water. We went to 15 of our neighbors. We knocked on the door. It happened to be a Sunday. They opened the door and they said, stay 6 feet away. But we said, we were thinking of you and brought you the most precious gift we could think of, a roll of toilet paper. And they all looked at us like, are you weird or what? And they laughed. And what was so cool is actually we sang them a song, and I can't sing at all in English or French. We wish you a happy Sabbath. We wish you a happy Sabbath. We wish you a happy Sabbath with new toilet paper. And everybody just laughed. About 3 days later, one of the couples came back. They took the inner rollout of it and they gave it to us and said, it was useful. Thank you. In other words, they used the toilet paper. That's fun. And I hope we have fun. We laugh at ourselves. We don't get so uptight with ourselves. I'm embarrassed. I'm heavy. My hair doesn't comb well. And you know what? If I let that bother me, it's going to bother someone else. Mm-hmm. Let it go. Engage. Have fun. And do I hope we in HR can model that for the people that we work with. So what do you do to have fun? What is fun for Marina? I just want to learn.
I have so a few things emerged for me in the crisis. Your story about toilet paper, I'm just sitting and thinking that is really funny and cool. Gives like a whole new meaning to, there's this prank I know in North America of throwing toilet paper in people's
Oh
houses.
yeah, you know what? You don't want to do that.
Instead, you're delivering it, and it's just clever because um, when I saw how much toilet paper people were buying and posting everything online and just all of that, I started having flashbacks of life growing up in the Soviet Union,
Oh,
and
okay.
people stocking up on things and lining up. So, and I also kept thinking, we're likely not going to run out in Canada. Like, it's a paper country. What's going on? But we'll learn a lot about ourselves in times of crisis, I found out. Number one, what I stocked on, sunflower seeds from the Ukrainian store, and
Oh wow.
a Ukrainian cake that gets delivered to the store. It's called Kiev cake. It's my favorite. My birthday was coming up end of March. So I wanted to make sure that I had the necessities. It's really interesting where our mind goes when we feel that we need to, stock up on something. What really saved me emotionally in this whole period and became extremely humbling, but also fun, has been trying to bring value to other people, to
Nice.
be, I opened up my calendar to job seekers and I said, if you need to speak either about your job search or more importantly, you need a pep talk where at the end you're going to be smiling and we're going to be going like this, we'll do it. It's been incredibly fun, and it's interesting. I never knew that about myself, but it's really interesting. I found out that it became a highlight of my day.
Nice.
I'm receiving more than I'm giving because it does something internally, and then that shift. I
Nice.
love though that you're saying that those things can be learned, and a lot of these skills can be learned. The soft skills, right? We think that optimism and humor and all those things, you have it or you don't have it. You're saying we can 50%. It is what it is. 50% we can learn. In one of your videos, Dave, you said the crisis will pass, the learnings will last.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about learning, what do you think, and keeping it now, going back to, the tangible and actionable things. And after this question, I'm going to be asking questions of our viewers. So please, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask, please put them in comments. What do you think HR professionals should be learning right now?
Uh, I'm going to do an A and a B. A. And again, I'm going to show that I don't speak very good French. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. These are not new themes. A. HR's job is not to do HR work, it's to create value for others. I
Mm,
think that's a message that's been around for a long time. I think you just demonstrated it. When I help other people feel better about themselves, I feel better about myself. And I think in HR, one of the things we should be learning is how do we create value for others even in this crisis? And increasingly, the others are not people just inside our company, but outside. One of the companies did a really cool thing. We're all socially isolated. We're all working at home. We're all, in fact, I made a joke once in March when we started. If I was a teenager spending this much time on my screen as I am right now, my parents would punish me because
right.
because we're all spending time on screens. And the comment was, how do you help connect your company to your key customers? So this HR person creatively said, our customers are having HR people on the screen. She reached out to some of the HR people in her customer organizations and said, how are you doing? What are you learning? And in that activity, number one, they created value for the customer by reaching out. So that's number one. Number two, what's the unique thing we in HR give to the customer and to our company? And I think there's three things. We give great expertise in talent. We help our people become more competent, committed, better experience, whatever the talent is. Two, we help our people and organization build the right culture and the right organization. And three, we create great leadership. In my simple mind, A, I'm creating value for many stakeholders. Inside, my employees, my business leaders, my company, outside, customers, investors. B, through talent, leadership, and organization. And when we in HR can follow those two very simple concepts, I think our conversations are meant to make others feel better about themselves. That's where I'd kind of go in that direction of HR and the moving forward. I'm going to make one other comment. As we try these soft skills, listening, caring, nurturing, there's a great concept, and it won a Nobel Prize, and it's called satisfice, F-I-C-E, not satisfy, but satisfice, by Herbert Simon. And he said, a lot of times in economics, you want to do everything well. Everything worth doing is worth doing well. In fact, in our lives, everything worth doing is worth doing poorly. It's so useful to listen to others, to care for others, to show empathy for others, that if I do it poorly in the pursuit of doing it better, do it. And so my coaching to business leaders who aren't naturally empathetic is go try it. You're not going to be perfect at it. I'm not perfect at humor. Humor was not my strength growing up. And in fact, a week ago, I did a talk and I said some jokes that were probably inappropriate. Try it, experiment. Not everything worth doing is worth doing well. In fact, some things are so important to do, empathy, relationship, caring, that they're worth doing poorly in the pursuit of doing better. That's some coaching I would give to our HR friends as well as to business leaders.
I love it. I'm just allowing it to soak in a bit because it's really, it really resonates. And I don't know why. A lot of the things you're saying, they're making me emotional. So I'm holding back a bit. I don't know if it's just that, we're feeling so raw these days, and, when you're hearing those things and feeling this vibe of, I don't know, you just emit this energy of hope and positivity. And that's what people are saying in comments as well. It's just so refreshing. I just want to be enveloped in it and just enjoy it for a moment. One of the questions from Claudia in our audience, she said, I would like to know how to reconnect with faith after a huge loss.
You talk about emotion. We each find faith in our own way. And that could be whatever religious background that is. It could be Muslim, it could be Judaism, it could be Hinduism, it could be Christianity. Claudia, if I were with you, what I'd love to say is think about the loss, and this could be a loved one. What do you think they would hope for you? What do you think they would hope for you? Can you connect with their memory and their heritage and take what you learned from that person and bring it forward into your life? For me, that's what faith is about. We talk in my faith about faith, hope, and charity. Faith is, if I do A, I may get B. If I can connect with that person, I may have the hope of getting B. And that leads me to a sense of charity or a sense of love of others. And so take small steps. Don't jump into faith in a huge, big way and go crazy with it, but just simply say, do I want to experience meaning? Do I want to experience hope? Am I willing to accept a sense of the divine in my life through whichever religious tradition you may come from? And to let yourself feel that. One of the passages I love from my religious background is the passage that in a complex and difficult world that we live in today, this pandemic, with all these crazy demands, health demands, and boy, do we mourn with those who mourn, physical demands, emotional demands, social demands. One of the things that I think faith gives us is that the ultimate source of peace is not in the world, it's from within us. Now, why do I like that so much? And let me end this discussion, and I'm happy to talk about faith as a source of personal peace. One of the great scholars of our field, I've just lost his name, was Martin Seligman. He was the father of what's called positive psychology. He was the head of the American Psychology Association, one of the great scholars, and he wanted to focus psychology on happiness, what's right, not what's wrong. And so all this work on positiveness, happiness, Seligman was kind of the godfather of that field. for him to discover the characteristics of happiness and what makes us feel better about ourselves, he went to the world's great religions: Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, Jewish, Christianity. And he and his colleague named Chris Peterson identified 24 character traits that allow us to feel a sense of flow, a sense of joy, a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. He used a religious base to get that. Here's what's interesting. Martin Seligman was a complete agnostic. He didn't have a religious faith. He didn't have the traditional religion, organizational faith, but he knew that in those religious traditions, you could identify character strengths that would allow you to be successful. He's the one that came up with Build on Your Strengths. And the Gallup organization and others have built on his theory. You can go online, Marty Seligman, Seligman, and take his strengths test. My wife actually did her PhD. One of her committee members was Chris Peterson, Seligman's co-author. And so this whole idea of finding in whatever religious tradition the character principles that let us find personal meaning within our tradition. And so to Claudia, take a small step, satisfice, do it poorly, but take a step. And I hope you'll find what works for you.
You made Claudia cry, just so you know. She shared them comments, and that made me feel emotional as well. I'm really happy that this is the angle our discussion took, talking about the things that are just the foundation of it all. It all has become, I have to tell you, I don't know if you feel similarly. I've never felt this connected to people in my entire life, even though we're obviously distant, but even globally. I've just felt the sense of community and people coming together. Predominant majority of people, not everybody, have become kinder a bit, I think, and a bit more open. And it's been a beautiful thing.
We did, Wendy and I, my wife and I, she's a very good writer. She works at the intersection of religion and psychology. So if you looked up Wendy, you'd find a lot of books. We did a book about, out of our experience in Montreal, called Why of Work. And I'll just share an experience we had in Montreal a long time ago. Remember, we're a minister for religion, and it doesn't matter about that. I'm going to get emotional here. One day, we happened to visit in Montreal a Haitian family in one of the poor areas of Montreal. They were immigrants. They were living in a small apartment. They had 4 or 5 kids, obvious poverty. But we walked into this sweet couple and their kids, and there was this spirit of goodness. And I don't know how to describe it. There was just this warmth, this peace, this love, this respect. And they had, a couch and a small chair and their children, but we could feel that. That night we went to dinner, and those who know Montreal, up on the hill, I can't remember the name of the hill, up by the overview of the hill, Ville Montréal up there, one of the big houses. And we were dressed up. It was very fancy. We knocked on the door. A butler let us in. They had original artwork, and there were 8 or 10 people invited. And when we got in the car on the way home from dinner, Wendy and I looked at each other and said, this morning we were in this refugee house, and there was a spirit. There was a warmth. Tonight, we were surrounded by elegant food, by great art, by thoughtful, creative people dressed with great dress, and it was empty. It was empty. Where would I rather be? And I'd rather be in that immigrant's house. And so we started thinking, that's kind of what we want to create. Why do we work? We want to create in a work setting, and now we put it in 3 things: a sense of belief, meaning, purpose at work. Can we find it? Becoming better, learning and growing, and a sense of belonging. And I love, Marina, we can belong across boundaries. We can connect with each other. And sometimes we can do that socially. I think we also need to do that physically. We need to be in each other's presence over time. But I think when we get become and belong, that's what we in HR bring our employees. We bring them a sense of belief in what the company's doing, a sense of becoming better, and a sense of belonging or being part of a community. That's why I think HR is such a noble profession, because it does provide that inner self that allows us to be successful at what we do. So I feel that strongly. And that experience in Montreal, that one day, And you can just imagine the contrast between the barrio, if you will, and the house on the hill. And I hope the people on the hill don't remember us because I feared that story. That would be extremely rude. And it's not about them; it's about us and what was most meaningful for us. So, boy, do I hope our friends in HR can do that. No matter where you come from, if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're large, if you're small, if you're educated, if you're not, this is a place for you. And we can make this workplace a place that works for you. I just get so excited. People say, what energizes you? That's one of the things that I think we bring to the people in our organizations.
It's incredible. That is a message that is in need of being spread, right? HR is often misunderstood. The role of HR is misunderstood. Important to educate HR professionals so that they embrace that as being their key value that they bring, but also important to spread that message to company owners and CEOs so they also understand what value they should be getting from HR, apart from the brochures, the booklets, union negotiations, and all that other stuff. Question from Shruti Parekh and her friend Mona. There's also a lot of, I'm so excited to hear Dave speak, and I can't believe that he's going to be speaking to us. She sent me this question in advance. She said, how does the HR operating model you developed need to adapt to the post-pandemic world?
You know, and I'm going to give a very strange answer. I don't know for sure. One of the things I'm learning, and I don't know how to do this yet, I think the pandemic crisis has taught me something. We live in a world of uncertainty. We want to have certainty. I mean, fill in the blank. 1, 3, 5, 7, 22, 96. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I want 9 to be the next answer. In this world, we don't know. When will our kids go back to school? I don't know. When can we socialize and go to restaurants and go to movies and go to theater? When can we go in the park? When can we go sit on the beach in British Columbia? I don't know. And I think one of the lessons for me is I don't know exactly what's going to happen as we go back to work in the office. I get a sense, at least where I am in the United States and probably throughout Canada with the HR influence, it's kind of clunky. And clunky means we're not sure how to do it. And so one of the things I'm trying to learn is, can I harness that uncertainty? Can I let the uncertainty be okay? Can I use uncertainty to discover new options? I don't want to just go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I want to begin to create, what can 9 look like? How can I be different? I also want to focus on what I can control. I can't control so many things. The pandemic, when government lightens up, how do we do things? What I can control is my response. For example, I've suggested that when we do return to the physical office, which we will, the first meeting probably should not be about work. I would strongly suggest that in HR, when we come back to the office to do work, which we've been doing at home, start with a town hall discussion in small teams with those that we work with. Tell me what you've been experiencing. What have you been experiencing while you've been home? What have you been learning? What's your personal story about what's happened at home that has been useful to you? For example, I've learned that I tend to go intense, and that's not always healthy for others. I've learned that I need to find routines to serve others, even though I'm working at a distance. Get people to tell stories, get people to share their personal experiences. And then when we connect at that more personal level, we can begin to pivot. So what did we learn about work? What did we learn about serving customers and creating value? How do we take and again start with that humanity and use that as a source of connection to allow us to do a better job in the work setting that we go to? And I can't remember the first name, Mona and Shruti. I so encourage you, as you think about coming back to work, to make it a personal connection time, to let people reconnect with each other and to share some of those stories. It's kind of what happens if we have a holiday we celebrate in Montreal, Jean Baptiste Day. That shows I did live in Montreal. I can't remember if it was the end of June, I think June 28th or 24th or sometime. When we come together with our family on one of these holidays, we don't just talk about the work we do, we talk about what we've been experiencing. And I think sometimes that personal connection will be an enabler for the more professional connection.
I love it. We have another Shruti on the watching us as well, Shruti Vasin. And she said, what are your thoughts on HR suddenly having so much value in the COVID world?
The best place to play on the Montreal Canadiens hockey team or on the Montreal football team, the Alouettes, if I remember right, is the backup quarterback. Why backup quarterback? Because you can always say, if I'd only have played, we'd have won the game. If I've only have played, we'd have won the game. Well, here's the crisis. When the quarterback is injured and you have to play, you now have to step up. I think a lot of times HR folks have said, I wish I was more involved. I'm at the table. That's an old metaphor. What do I contribute? How do I play? We now play. We are on the first team. We're on the front line on this emotional talent, leadership, and organizational capability. We are now first team in the game on the front line. We got to play. I hope in HR we can learn as we go. I'm going to reinforce what I said before. Don't assume the first time you go into the game and be a starting quarterback, you're going to be perfect. Learn, fail forward, growth mindset, get better at what we do. HR, as our value creation opportunities go up, don't hide from them. Take experiments, learn quickly, fail forward, begin to make failing and learning a part of what we do. When I learned to teach for a number of years, I don't think I taught as well as I do today because I studied it, I thought about it, and I constantly tried to improve.
Love it. I have two more quick important questions at the end, but one last question from our viewers. Moran, who is my business partner, asks, you talk about HR working from the outside in versus inside out. What does that mean?
Very simple. When we do HR work, start with who's going to benefit. What are the outcomes? Who are the stakeholders? Is it an employee? Is it a business leader? Is it the company? Is it a customer? Is it an investor? Is it a community? And start outside in. Value is not what I give. It's what somebody gets because of what I give. At a personal level, I've been married 44 years. I used to always get my wife flowers on her birthday, which was February 14th. Here's what I discovered. That didn't create value for her because she said after about the fourth year, Dave, I think you have a standing account at the floral shop that they'll send a dozen roses on February 14th. The reality is that's probably true. So I got to stop. What will be meaningful for my wife? What will be valuable to her? How do I give a gift that works for her? The same is true in HR. Outside in. Don't define what we do. Define what somebody gets from what we do.
Interesting. I love how you're always giving those examples that relate between personal and professional. It's very interesting. Okay, so my two quick closing questions. Number one is, would you kindly ask your wife, Wendy, whether she would be a guest on my show as well and allow me the pleasure of interviewing her?
Send me an email. I'll send it. She is also an introvert. She works at the intersection of spirituality and religion and healing. Look her up. She's done a number of books, and she hesitates to get into the business world as much. She has an MBA from UCLA. She has a great MBA, but her focus is more on psychology. I will ask her, and I've learned enough not to answer.
That's why I asked you if you would just ask.
Send me an email and I'll send it to her.
Perfect. And then the most important question: when are you coming back to Montreal?
As soon as possible. J'aime beaucoup Montréal. By the way, when I come back, there's a little restaurant around the side of Notre Dame. I can't remember the name of it. It is so good. We just, again, Montreal is a place where when I think of the memories and the people that we met. And it is such a warm, and somebody said to me, and I know this is going to come across a little negative, but the Quebecois can be cold on the outside, but they're warm on the inside. And that once you get through some of that outer shell, there is a lifeblood, there is a warmth, there is a connection. I still get emails after 15 years of being gone from people that were there, sharing their experiences, their livelihoods. And again, some of it was the office we held through a church where you sit down as a minister in this Haitian home, in this rich home, and feel people's love and feel people's concern and help people find that sense of peace and that sense of personal well-being that we all hope we can give to everybody. So I would love to come back to Montreal. We love coming back there and visiting with our friends.
Well, and I hope you know that you have a large community of HR professionals here that are inspired by your work, that are, big followers of it as well and benefit from it. So you have a lot of people eagerly waiting for you in Montreal if ever you come. And I'm not sure what restaurant you're referring to, but if ever you want to be referred to some other amazing restaurants, you've got a willing and able guide right here.
No problem. Somebody told me every restaurant in Montreal is probably good because if it wasn't, it would go broke. Because there are so many good restaurants that if you're going to survive, they're good. We love the smoked meat. We just enjoyed all parts of the. Well, that's not true. We did not love winter. Winter in Montreal is not always the best. Now you come from the Ukraine and the Soviet Union, where Montreal but sometimes the snow and the winter and the speed bumps. We didn't love all the speed bumps on the road, but
those are still here. And by the way, it still snowed a couple of days ago. So just so you know, it's finally we're coming out of it, but we still got a bit even a few days ago.
Thank you,
David. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what has been an absolute highlight, not only from the standpoint of learning from you, but again, I will repeat it again because I find it is the most priceless thing to find these days. Your energy that you give, the feeling of hope and optimism, and just this feeling, some of it is hard to describe, is incredibly rare, and what a gift. Thank you so much for it.
Thank you. What a privilege to work with you and to partner with you. Thank you, Marina. And I know our paths will cross again. Thank you.
I really hope so. Thank you again.